Welcome to episode number 83 of the Marine Layer podcast. Our free agent profile of the week is JD Martinez. His DH spot is now filled on the Dodgers, so he's going to have to go somewhere else. Could it be the Mariners? We'll take a look and see if that's a fit. We'll take a look around baseball with our MLB Wraparound. And as always, close out the show with Speak Your Mind.
This show is brought to you by our friends over at Pagotcha's Pub 85, our favorite place to go hang out, eat some great food, get some good price drinks, and watch a bunch of games because there's 22 TVs in the place. That's Pagotcha's Pub 85 in Kirkland. If you haven't been, make sure to go and go get some pizza and go get some good price drinks. And speaking of those good price drinks, when are they the best time to go get them? Well, they've got some good happy hour specials. It's Monday through Friday, 2 to 6 p.m. The specials include $3 domestic beers, $4 Manny's Blue Moons, $4 house wines, $4 Mac and Jacks, and $4 Wells. All that, great food, great drinks, and a bunch of space to watch the games with your friends over at Pagotcha's Pub 85 in Kirkland. Before we start the show, this is your reminder to download our episodes, leave us a 5-star review, and follow the show wherever you're listening on the audio side of our podcast. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and follow us on social media on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube Shorts at Marine Layer Pod.
Let's get it rolling. And we welcome you to this episode of the Marine Layer podcast, part of the Just Baseball Podcast Network, recording here on Thursday night, December 14th. We let off our Wednesday episode with a Jeff Passan appearance on Seattle Sports earlier in the day. Today, here on Thursday, we'll lead off this episode with Cal Raleigh's appearance on Seattle Sports this morning at 9 a.m. A lot of people were expecting something from Cal today. It was very notable when Cal popped up on the schedule on Wednesday to appear there on Thursday. He was on with Mike Salk and Brock Heward on Brock and Salk. And really, Lyle, he didn't give much on the radio today. I think people were expecting something, but he didn't really give them anything to react to. I thought Cal was pretty buttoned up.
He was much more tame than Jeff Passan earlier in the week. Those answers felt media trained. I don't know about you, but it felt like those were very prepared answers that Cal gave, which is a little bit different than the way he spoke at the end of the season.
You're right. Does it benefit the offseason? Does it benefit the Mariners for Cal to not give a media trained answer? Does it benefit them for him to start just spewing stuff on the radio while under contract again? Not really, right?
No, it doesn't. Maybe I'm selfishly looking for some funny content because the offseason so far has been so forgetful and so just miserable flat out that maybe I was looking for any way to get some juices flowing, listen to Cal say something similar to what he said at the end of the year and double down on everything. But it seems like he's probably learned his lesson because his tone was very different this time.
He was given the opportunity, especially there at the end of the interview. Mike Salk gave him the opportunity. He was asked a question along the lines of how are you guys reacting to how this offseason has played out? What do you truly think this clubhouse thinks? And I believe Cal's words were, I'm not going to speak for this clubhouse, and I don't think it's appropriate for me to disclose that. And I just don't think I'm going to comment on that. Wink, wink, wink. What we actually think. But, he's like, it's along the lines of early in the offseason, everything you expect to hear from, as it was put on the internet, a leader, right? Like Cal's a leader. He's the adult in the room. He's going to lead this clubhouse despite, how old he is in third full season in the big leagues upcoming here in 2024. So that's what Cal sort of had to do, right? He had to give people not another chance to get riled up and get pissed and to flood our comment section with things like, oh, Cal said the roof's burning down. I can't take another week of this offseason. Cal said it's all over. If Cal Raleigh comes out on Seattle Sports and just starts saying I hate it here, I want to get traded, I can't stand this ownership group, then, I don't want to be a baseball fan anymore. I can't do it. And Cal's like, okay, guys, I think some of us can be calm and reserved and perhaps not say everything that everyone wants to hear at this very moment, because it's really just not going to benefit anyone in this situation. It certainly won't benefit anyone on the roster. And think of it this way. Mariners are trying to attract free agents right now, somehow, not with the checkbook. So when they don't have the checkbook to attract free agents, they want to attract, hey, look at our clubhouse. Would you want to go to a clubhouse where the clubhouse leaders actively calling out ownership for not giving a shit?
No, right. You wouldn't.
Correct.
And maybe then in that case, the tone would change once we get to spring training if they've still done nothing by then. But maybe at the point where it's mid-December and you're still hoping to bring some good names in, then they're trying to be as kind of keep information as close to the vest as they possibly can about how they're feeling so far. And with the hope that maybe ownership will have a changing of the guard and the front office will be given the reins to go out and make some moves in the next few weeks. Because you're right, like it certainly can't help if Cal Raleigh's going on the radio and saying this sucks. But how he's really feeling, I can't imagine he's all that inspired by what's gone down so far this winter.
In the end, I think we have to remember that the roster is not in charge of roster changes, period. Like, go listen to that interview and listen to how Brock and Salk, who are two very veteran people on the radio in terms of interviewing and talking to athletes, of how they talk about the interview. And think about how they would have talked to Jerry if they had Jerry on instead. You know, Jerry, it's going to be all about the personnel. It's going to be all about the moves. It's going to be all about... They would ask him about free agents. He probably won't comment on them, but they'll definitely ask. But Cal, you know, it's more about him than it is about the rest of the roster, because the guys on the roster, they control themselves and they can kind of control the vibe in the clubhouse, but they can't add people into the clubhouse. So in the end, what Cal also said, we got to control what we can control right now. Kind of off of Scott's "these are the cards we've been dealt" comments. But it's right for Cal. He's correct on that, and he did what was necessary to give us a not chaotic week before Christmas.
See, I think a lot of people figured when Cal was going on the radio this week, it was going to be because he had some more thoughts to get off his chest. But now hearing the way he talked during that interview, what are the chances somebody with the Mariners actually set him up to do that interview saying, hey, this offseason so far between the fan base, between the way the media is talking about us, has been a nightmare. Can you go on the radio and try to diffuse any of it? What do you think the odds of that are?
I think pretty low.
You think?
I don't think this was a team ask. Like, how often does a team ask players to do media in the offseason? Like, not that often, unless it's like something really big. Usually they're not jumping head over heels to say, hey, Cal, can you go appear on like King 5 tonight?
This team is also not deaf. They might not be making the moves people want to see them make right now, but they're not deaf, because all you have to do is open the newspaper or open Twitter to see the discourse of what's going on right now. And again, like they might be getting dragged more than any team in baseball right now. So I'm sure the team knows that. And I'm sure they want to try to control the narrative of their own franchise. So I don't know, maybe they didn't ask Cal to do it. I just wouldn't be shocked if they did.
If they asked Cal to do it, I don't know if that was the specific message. I think if there's anything people want to hear is they want to be reassured of the guys they have on the roster, which if you're not going to add, at very least you want to be confident in the guys you have, that they're, you know, working to be better and that they're good guys and that they're a team that you can root for, really. And in the end, Cal still wants that. He doesn't want no one showing up at the ballpark. That makes it no fun for him at all. He wants fans to still feel confident that they're going to go out and watch a good product in 2024. And again, as part of a team leader, that's his responsibility. He mentioned in that interview, I mean, how much he appreciates the fans and how much he appreciates the city of Seattle and supporting this team. Well, it's his part as well in the offseason throughout all these turbulent times to show his support to the fans as well, whether it be through a radio interview in the offseason from wherever he's spending his offseason. I think Florida, I'm not totally sure, but like you get that, like it's sort of a give and go here in the offseason where Cal is now doing his responsibility as a member of this team to help out the fans a little bit.
Yeah, he did what he was asked to do. That's for sure. Now, on another note, when on earth is this team going to start making some moves? It's mid-December here.
Well, when the AAVs of the free agents drop below 20, I think. Yeah. I mean, if Jung-Hoo Lee is getting, who we'll talk about in our MLB Wraparound, He's getting an AAV of a little bit under $20 million for a KBO bat, a KBO hitter. The KBO, as we've highlighted, you can go back and do our episode of that when we talked about Jung-Hoo, and like you and I very easily articulated the success of KBO athletes in Major League Baseball. And to see that number is, as you said, floor. It was flooring to see the number there for Jung-Hoo. So if that's the bidding number that bats are starting at, and that's what the Mariners need at this moment, might be waiting a little bit if they're trying to sign somebody. Well, I will say the trade market did get kicked off today. Another topic we'll talk about in our wraparound. That will help. That will help.
You know who I'd like to see the Mariners sign? JD Martinez.
Oh, I kind of like what you're thinking at, Lyle. Lyle, do you have a bigger pitch on JD Martinez? What's your pitch on JD Martinez?
I do. And if we're going to get into our first topic here of JD Martinez and the fit with the Mariners, here it is. He's not going back to the Dodgers. The Dodgers kind of have a DH now. And if you want to listen to us talk about the Dodgers' new DH, we did a reactionary show on Saturday that's about 20 minutes. You can go back and listen to that. So JD's probably going somewhere else. Why can't it be Seattle? This guy hits the ball extremely hard. He has a 10-year track record of success. He just came off a great 2023, and the Mariners need bats. And by the way, I don't think he's going to cost that much. Sign me up for this guy.
What do you qualify not costing that much?
Okay, he would cost a lot in the Mariners budget. I'm thinking like, I don't know, 2-year deal somewhere between 20 to 24 million.
I said 3 for 45.
Oh, so you're going higher. But okay, so
like thinking about the inflation on bats this offseason.
Yeah, fair. But would you pay JD that money?
Yeah. Dude, this guy has the best looking baseball savant page I think I've ever seen. I sent you the screenshot yesterday of his year by year expected stats. Well, it is a wall of red. A wall.
Yeah, the only thing that was kind of missing from that page is if you look at his 2023 profile, he struck out a little bit more than he usually does, and he wasn't walking quite as much, but it's not Teoscar Hernandez levels of strikeouts and walks. And in fact, his track record says he is not that guy. And when you look at everything else he does, oh my God, he just crushes baseballs left and right. Like nothing phases that guy. He's 30. He just finished his age 35 season. He's still hitting the ball as hard as ever.
Here's what I'm going to say on JD Martinez. Looking at his batted ball profile, if he were to sign in Seattle and fail, I give up. I would officially turn in my fandom card and say, I'm retiring. Obviously, the players cannot hit in this ballpark. I don't know what needs to change, but something needs to. Because JD Martinez, if you just take a look, there's no weakness really in his profile. Before this season, there really was no weakness in his hitting profile. This dude hits the ball hard. He hits the barrel consistency. He hits the sweet spot consistency. His expected batting is high. His quality of contact is high. His expected slugging is high as well. And, he just DHs. We finally have heard the Mariners say, we will put a DH squarely in the DH spot. We're not going to platoon guys. We're not going to rotate guys in. We're going to put just a DH there if we can. And JD Martinez would have been a fantastic person in the DH spot last year. And even though he has some strikeout problems this year, he would be a good fit in that DH spot. Here's the drawback, and here's the reason why they wouldn't sign him, Lyle. After watching what the Mariners did at the plate last season, and they struck out way too much, staring at a soon-to-be 36-year-old JD Martinez in the box in 2023, striking out 31% of the time. That's going to make, even with this batted ball profile, that's going to make Jerry Dipoto wince and make Jerry Dipoto a little more hesitant as to adding JD Martinez given the moves they've made this offseason.
Probably a little bit, but again, it's not like Teoscar Hernandez, because while Teo always hit the ball hard, he had a history of striking out and he never walked. JD Martinez isn't like that. Now, I understand that his walk rate was down and his K rate was up this past year, but who's to say he can't turn that around next year? Because usually, for the most part of JD's career, especially about this 10-year stretch when he's been really good, he strikes out in the low to mid-20s range, which is certainly manageable. And he walks more at about 8 or 9% of the time, which is around league average, maybe slightly above league average. honestly, there's been some years where he walked 10% of the time or more, but those days are probably behind him. I don't see why you can't get back to that. Like, this is only 1 year. He had some issues with strikeouts and walks, and it wasn't even the level that Teo had it with. So who's to say he can't rebound?
But here's the optics I want you to think about. First of all, think of when the timing of the year. The timing of the year is his age 35 season, his oldest season. Bat speed slows down. Eye at the plate isn't quite as good, isn't as sharp. Again, when you lose bat speed, you're going to have to cheat a little bit more, and you might chase a little bit more often. I don't think I'm as optimistic as you as that his swing and miss will go away. I mean, I looked at some of his swing rates on Fangraphs, and there wasn't really that much change. His chase rate stayed almost the exact same. His swinging inside and outside the zone pretty much stayed the exact same as they were in his past season, where he struck out 24% of the time in 2022. The only thing that changed is he just stopped hitting pitches out of the zone. And what that tells me is that his bat speed was not good enough to hit pitches that were not in the strike zone, which for someone who doesn't chase is not an issue. But JD Martinez chases. He has chased in his career. He's sometimes been a decent walk guy, but that hasn't stopped him from swinging at pitches out of the strike zone. But now that he can't catch up to some of these pitches out of the strike zone, that is an issue. He might not strike out 31% of the time. He might strike out a little bit less, 28, 27%. But I think Jerry would think that is a little bit high as well. And it's hard. I will say it is very hard to have as productive a season that JD Martinez had in 2023 while striking out that much. A 135 WRC plus, made an all-star game as a hitter despite striking out that much. That's pretty difficult to do and pretty difficult to repeat.
I was just about to throw the WRC plus numbers out there. What about the fact he just had that good of an offensive season? What about the fact that outside of a 2020 that you can just throw out the window, because I don't really count 2020 for anybody, it was such a weird year, his lowest WRC plus over the last decade or so was 119, which was in 2022. You know what I would say if JD Martinez was going to put up a 120 WRC plus with the Mariners? Sign me right up. Teoscar Hernandez did not do that. His WRC plus was not 120. If it had been, I think people would have been pretty happy with the guy.
Okay, so if you're asking me if I would sign JD Martinez, yes, I would still sign JD Martinez. So, let's just get that out of the way. Would Jerry sign JD Martinez, given the moves and the philosophical change they have done this offseason, Lyle? I think you and I know the answer to this.
But if you're going to strike out 27% of the time and pair that with a 125 to 130 WRC plus, is that not worth it? They need offense.
Yeah, it is. I think it's worth it. But do they think it's worth it?
I'm asking Jerry. Sorry, I'm not trying to send this back at you. I'm trying to speak this into the podcast verse and hope somehow Jerry hears it one day. That even if he's going to strike out 27-ish% of the time, which again is a little high, but it's not what Gino and Teo and Kelnick and Ford were doing last year. If you're going to strike out 27% of the time and put up a WRC plus of 130, how do you not sign up for that?
It's a good question. That's a good question. I would sign up for it. I'd give him a 3-year deal if he wanted to, because as I've said, and I think I've stayed consistent on this podcast, I really don't care about the money down the road because as these years have gone on and the Mariners have continued to underwhelm, it really 2 years down the road does not matter. Next year matters. And next year, they could really, really use JD Martinez. Heck, when we talked about JD Martinez last offseason on this podcast, I think we both agreed they should give him a shot. And they did not. And he signed a 1-year, $10 million deal, ultra affordable with the Dodgers. And he did this. And to be honest, he would have fit right in with the Mariners last season. He would have fit right in.
You're telling me that instead of having AJ Pollock on a 1-year, $7 million deal, they could have had JD on a 1-year, $10 million deal.
I'm not even talking about AJ Pollock, dog. I'm talking about the GOAT.
I'm thinking. Would I would have rather had AJ Pollock. What am I saying? I'm kidding. I would not have.
Tommy LaStella? You wouldn't have rather had Tommy?
Yeah, exactly. I'm just saying, if AJ was the biggest free agent contract the Mariners Jerry had ever given to a Mariners position player at $7 million, why couldn't they have just given it to JD Martinez at 10 or 12?
It would have been in the playoffs.
Yeah, they would have made the playoffs with JD. He would have DH'd all the time. They wouldn't have had this platoon of DHs who are just supposed to be utility guys. Well, listen, they've got a chance for redemption here because while JD's now going to be more expensive, they can still sign him. He's still out there. He needs a new team and a team that needs some bats.
Yeah, they have a chance at redemption. They're going to pay. They're going to overpay because of it. Like they probably will. As we've said, the market is a little inflated on hitters this offseason. If they wanted him at a market rate, probably should have paid him last offseason, like we said. But instead, they're going to have to pay the tax of waiting an offseason too long. It's like they did with Nelson Cruz all the way back 10 years ago.
Don't forget the Seattle tax, too. It's hard to attract free agents and playing in this ballpark, so they're going to have to overpay other teams that bid for him, too.
Yep. Yeah, well, Mr. Stanton, the ball's in your court. Jerry, we've made our case. JD Martinez, we would sign on. And here's the endorsement you need, Lyle, for all of our listeners and for you, my co-host, to feel confident that the Mariners should get JD Martinez. John Heyman said that the Mariners should be interested in JD Martinez.
Oh, our favorite, our absolute favorite.
Hey, he came out in support of the fans this week. And he was like, yeah, they should probably spend more money.
Wow. Heyman trying to right his wrongs with the Pacific Northwest natives, with the Mariner faithful. He's trying to turn the page. Who thought we'd ever see the day?
Not me. But you know what? If that's the stance John Heyman's going to take for once in my life, I will say, John Heyman, I agree with you.
And even as we wrap this up, if you want to just throw a couple more stats that are a little more basic out there, JD Martinez hit 33 bombs last year. He's hit 30-plus doubles in 4 of his last 5 full seasons. This guy's career OPS is 874, and his last decade of ball has been pretty unreal. So, sure, he's getting old. Strikeouts are going up. I don't care. And I'm also kind of done. Outside of the fact that they have this stupid payroll limitation, which should not be a thing, I'm kind of done caring about or worrying about John Stanton's money or the Mariners ownership group's money, Chris Larson, everybody else. They should just go pay good players, period. They
should. And even if JD Martinez hits a career low WRC plus next season, let's say he goes below his career low 119, or in the last decade, sorry, his low is 119. Even if he goes 115, do you think of how monumental of an upgrade that is? Like, that is staggering.
That's about a 10 to 12% upgrade over Teo, which is, yes, an upgrade.
I'm not even talking Teo. I'm talking the DH spot.
Oh, well, then you're talking like
30. 30 to 40.
if not more. And again, when I say the last decade, when we give you these numbers over the last decade, we're throwing out 2020 because he had a really bad 2020, but we're not counting that because, again, it was such a weird year.
And we're throwing out his Astros years too, where, by the way, if you don't know JD Martinez's story, he got cut by the Astros. They let him go as a free agent, and the Tigers signed him as a minor league free agent, I think.
I have to look it up.
Yeah. And
it was either that or he got a very small big league contract and then he turned into a star.
Yeah, and he did. And he turned into a absolute star, and he has been one of the best players in baseball since he debuted. One of the best hitters in baseball. I'll say he's a DH, so I don't know if you can say player, but hitters, absolutely. And we have our full endorsement for JD Martinez. Before we get to our MLB wraparound, a word from Simply Seattle. I'd like to remind you guys have 10 days as of recording. As of release, you will have 10 days. No, it'll be 11 days. 11 days until Christmas. 11 days to make sure all of your family members are happy. Now, my recommendation to make your family members happy is to go to Simply Seattle. We've shopped at Simply Seattle. We've gotten our gear from Simply Seattle. I got a great Sonics crew neck that I love. Lyle has his Julio Rodriguez hoodie from Simply Seattle. They make awesome gear. So if you have sports fans in your life, if you have Seattle sports fans in your life, go to Simply Seattle, give their selection a look. Huskies, Kraken, Mariners, Seahawks, Sonics, all the best gear in the Pacific Northwest. Go check them out at simplyseattle.com. You can use our code Marine15 for 15% off your order. Again, go to simplyseattle.com. Use our code Marine15 for 15% off your order, and make sure to do all your holiday shopping at Simply Seattle. Let's get to our MLB Wraparound. Up first on the Wraparound, we talked about the signing itself on Saturday's episode. And now here today, Lyle, we're going to dive into Shohei Ohtani's contract and what is by far the most unique contract ever signed in Major League Baseball. Let's just kick it off with this. He signed a 10-year, $700 million deal on Saturday. $680 million of it is deferred until the contract is up in 2034.
Unreal. He is making $2 million a year off that contract for the next 10 seasons. Does it matter to Shohei? Probably not, because the guy makes $40 to $50 million a year in endorsements. So if you want to factor in the contract from the Dodgers and the $2 million a year he'll get, and then all his endorsement money, he's still the highest paid player in baseball. So he probably doesn't care that the fact that it's going to be 10 years from now when he starts getting the real lump sum of that contract and the bulk of it basically after he's done playing and after his time with the Dodgers has ended. But yeah, he's still going to be making a ton of money. And the fact that Dodgers set this contract up like this, it's pretty wild. There are some unique specifications that we're going to get into here about it, but very, very wisely set up by the Dodgers.
So if you're not aware of how this, I would say it's essentially a tax evasion. The Dodgers are doing legal tax evasion on the salary cap, on the luxury tax thresholds. That's essentially what this contract is doing. Shohei is doing this so the Dodgers can sign as many players as possible. And you might think, if you haven't read or seen it, how did they get away with only paying Shohei Ohtani $2 million a year, unless that's what he specifically agreed to? Well, the Dodgers have to pay the tax amount on what the value of that money is currently worth year by year of that contract. So the current value of his deferred money, which is 10 for $680 million, is $46 million a year in current day money. So that's the number, that's the tax number that the Dodgers still have to pay. They still have to take $44 million and they have to put it in like an escrow account. So it grows to $68 million. So when they have to pay Shohei in 10 years, that money is there and waiting for him. So they can't just get around the salary cap by paying him $2 million a year after agreeing to a $70 million a year contract. But the craziest thing about this is that even when you take the escrow numbers and the current day value of that contract, Lyle, it is still the biggest contract in baseball history. It still beats Mike Trout's contract by $34 million, even the fact that it's deferred for 10 seasons.
Takes quite a player to get a deal like that. Now, in case anybody's still a little confused on how this contract's going to work for Shohei, the guys at the Just Baseball show, Peter Apple, Aram Layton, obviously friends of the pod, they've been on with us. They did a really good breakdown of this contract in a little bit of a longer form than TJ and I are going to do. So if you want more details on this, we certainly recommend you go listen to them. But here's basically the easiest way we can dumb the contract down for anybody who's still a little bit confused. Shohei himself is going to make $2 million a year. That part's true. The Dodgers still have to fork up $46 million a year to the tax. So the Dodgers are not getting away with only giving up $2 million a year for the next 10 years. They still have to give up $46 million per season. Now, that's less than paying $70 per year, and paying the $46 still frees them up a little bit to go sign some other guys, but it's not quite the $70. And they're also not getting away with literally only paying him $2 million a year. Because the narrative right now on social media and on TV and whatever else is, oh, the Dodgers only have to pay Shohei $2 million a year for the next 10 years. Look at all these fringe big leaguers making more next year than Shohei. Well, it's not quite like that. The Dodgers still have to pay $46 million a year due to Shohei to the tax. So less than 70, but it's still a decent amount.
It's still bizarre to look that in terms of cash value, though, Shohei is the 17th highest paid player on the Dodgers. 17th highest paid player.
Think about it like this. They say, I mean, if you want to go down this road, they say one WAR is worth $8 million. So in that regard, Shohei has to put up like what, a 0.2 WAR to live up to his contract this next year in the next 10 years and make $2 million.
He needs to play the first series of the season and that's it.
Yeah. and then he can just sit out. But yeah, it is It is wild. I will say, I think my favorite thing that I've seen over the last few days regarding all the Shohei contract stuff was the guy who put together that Wolf of Wall Street clip that used Leo DiCaprio's voice to totally AI his voice, but talking about Shohei's contract. And it's the scene where they're all on the golf course and then they get back to the office. And it's like some lawyers from Major League Baseball came down to the office and tried to check this all out, but we turned the air conditioning up. And then it cuts back to actual Leonardo DiCaprio playing Jordan Belfort for like 5 seconds, where he says, "You're probably asking yourself, was all of this legal?" Absolutely fucking not. So if you want to go look up that clip, it's not very hard to find on Twitter because it is surfaced beyond belief over the last few days. It's very well put together, I will say, to the guy who made it. So I've gotten a laugh out of that.
What's also pretty bizarre about this contract, do you remember Ronaldo's contract he signed with the Saudi team? Do you remember that? 3 for $674?
Yeah.
Like, this contract's bigger than that.
Yeah, it's the biggest contract a pro athlete of a team sport has ever signed.
Which is, it's insane. Like, they did line up like Ronaldo's contract next to it. Now, again, if Ronaldo signed a 10-year deal with the Saudi league, he easily would have broken that. But he only signed a 3-year deal. So Shohei still does have the upper hand. And it's just bizarre that Major League Baseball, which has thrown around some pretty ridiculous numbers in these long-term extensions, is the league on top. Like, not the highest revenue league, not the most watched league in the world, not the most global sport in the world, but still, they have one of the most notable global athletes playing their game, and he is now being compensated accordingly. I wonder how much money the Dodgers made as soon as he inked the contract on Saturday. Like, how much money of that contract came back to them in endorsements and in advertisements and inquiries and all this stuff? How much do you think they made back in the first, let's say, week since now?
Well, you saw the note about the jersey sales. The dude set a record by Fanatics in the first 48 hours that his jersey went on sale. So that alone is already making the Dodgers back a ton of money.
Did you see the price of opening day?
What is it? $800 I saw?
Double.
Oh, it's $1,600.
Yeah.
for like a standing room only seat. See, this is what I mean. While I'm still sad he's not going to be a Mariner, and if you want my reactionary video to that is on our social media pages. But if you're just talking about the two of us being baseball fans, this is fantastic for the sport. I know a lot of people are not happy he went to the Dodgers. They're forming a super team, quote unquote. But you know what? This is very, very good for baseball. Not only is he going to be in the playoffs every year, but have you seen how much baseball and Shohei have been talked about over the last week? And especially like since the day the crazy flight tracking stuff happened, baseball's on people's radars now. Like, people that don't follow baseball are now following baseball, and they're following Shohei, which is a very, very good thing.
Speaking of that Friday, can we just take a moment? The fact that Shohei mentioned that he was sitting on the couch with his dog Decoy, by the way, in case people were wondering, Decoy, ironically named for the fact that there was a decoy flight on Friday to Toronto that he was sitting on his couch laughing at as he's seeing the world meltdown.
Okay. I don't know if that's actually why he named the dog Decoy.
No, it's not, but it's a very funny coincidence.
It is a funny coincidence. Friend of the pod, Jason Stark, put that out there saying, oh, so he named his dog after the flight to Toronto. But yeah, I mean, so I guess that the truth comes out about his dog's name and all that. But yeah, that was hilarious to hear that Shohei saw all this stuff happening and he's just sitting on his couch. He's like, "Whoa, they think I'm on a flight to Toronto, those morons," or whatever. Yeah. Now, he didn't actually say that.
Should we tell him? It's like, no, like, let them have a little bit more fun.
Again, Shohei's too nice to actually say that out loud. But again, like, the fact he did admit he was kind of sitting there to himself laughing, hearing all these rumors, was pretty funny to hear.
Do you think he called Yusei about the sushi restaurant? He's like, dude, do you know what they're saying about your sushi reservation?
Oh man. Yeah. This is good for baseball. Like the fact he's going to be in a big market, he's going to be in the postseason. Like, this is what the sport needs. And if you're just talking about growing the game, while we're sad he's not going to be a Mariner, this is a good thing.
There's a couple of other interesting stipulations in his contract. First of all, he's guaranteed to have his interpreter, which is great. Great for his interpreter. He gets his interpreter is guaranteed his whole contract. Second, he gets a suite, not shocking, all regular season and postseason games. That's fantastic for all of his family and probably his interpreter if he's not in the dugout. Well, actually, no, his interpreter would be in the dugout. You're right.
I was going to say Ippei sits in the dugout. Ippei, who's his interpreter, sits in the dugout.
Okay, well, Ippei's family and Shohei's family gets a suite every single game. The third one, which was by far the most interesting, and I really don't think we've ever seen this. There's a clause in the contract that if Andrew Friedman or owner, who's the president of baseball operations, or Mark Walter, who's the principal owner of the Dodgers, they get fired or change roles, Shohei can opt out of his contract. I've never seen that.
It's crazy. That is Mark Walter and Andrew Friedman. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter to Mark Walter. He's the owner, but Andrew Friedman has to be hyped. He's like, I just secured my own job security for the next 10 years.
Yeah. No one's ever going to fire me.
No. And not that Andrew Friedman was ever getting fired anyway. He might be the best GM/president of baseball ops in the whole sport at this point, but it's still nice to have the security. It's like, well, we have the best player on the planet, so I'm not going anywhere. And now there's a clause in the contract saying I'm not going anywhere.
So do you think Andrew Friedman was sitting down at the table and Shohei and his agent are going over things he would like? And I'm just imagining the Drewski meme where he's like, where he's sitting at the table and Shohei's like, oh yeah, we want guaranteed, you guys guaranteed employment here. And Friedman's like, me?
Yeah.
Me?
Yeah. Oh man. Here, okay, I've got two more quick things on Shohei before we move to the next topic.
Okay.
Number one, could the Mariners have done this deal? Could they have done the deferred money type of deal where they pay Shohei the $2 million a year, the $46 million to the tax, and then in 10 years, you know what? This ownership can sell the team. Maybe they'll sell it sooner than that. Could they have done it?
I'm going to say no. Let me tell you why I'm going to say no. The Dodgers, in their pitch to Shohei Ohtani, outlined to him, we have made the playoffs 10 times in the last decade. And we have one ring. After all of that, we have one ring. And we qualify that as a disappointment. And Shohei said he was so glad to hear how committed to winning they were. Now, Lyle, I'm not a hot take artist, but I'm not sure that line of talking would have come out of the same meeting with the Mariners.
Well, considering they missed the playoffs this year and said the season was a success, probably not.
that ends the conversation right there. In theory, do you think they could have put up enough equity to defer $680 million of current day money? Yes. Yeah. Like, how much is Root Sports worth?
I don't know. It seems to be just decreasing by the day.
Okay, well, if Root Sports was worth $500 million and they found a way, if anyone is actually a loan expert that listens to this, please comment on this video and tell me if I'm wrong. Or if you're listening on podcast, go to YouTube and comment and tell me if I'm an idiot. Like, you can take out a loan and then put up the equity of your business against the loan, so the bank obviously has something to hold on to while you pay back that loan. I think they can, taking out a little bit. It's like a home equity loan, except it's for Root Sports Northwest.
Well, that, and like we talked about with Shohei, this contract's going to pay for itself. So him just being here would have made the Mariners a ton of money. So yes, they would have had the funds to pay him if they'd actually signed him.
Yeah. Do I think they could have paid him? Yes. Do I think the conversation would have ended as we missed the playoffs, it's a success? Yes. That it would have ended right there. He would have walked right out of the room, gotten back on his private jet, and flew back down to LA.
Here's the last thing I want to wrap up with Shohei before we move on. I'm sure most baseball fans agree with us on this, but I just want to continue to push this narrative as much as possible. He is the best athlete on planet Earth. He's not just the best baseball player on planet Earth. He's the best athlete on the planet. And if you're out there and you're going to say Patrick Mahomes, my response to that is, if Patrick Mahomes decides one day he wants to become a defensive end and starts playing Micah Parsons level defense on the defensive side of the ball, then we will begin the conversation of Shohei versus Patrick Mahomes. Like, we're not even having it right now. We'll begin it if that happens. Or if Kylian Mbappe, big soccer star for anybody who doesn't know the name, also decides one day, you know what? I want to start being a goalie. And then he also becomes a top 5 goalie in the world. We will begin the conversation. But until then, it's not even close. It's Shohei.
I agree.
Yeah. So, congrats to you, Shohei. It is quite a contract, and as everybody would agree with, you're more than worth it. All right. Second storyline. A little bit less money to this next player, but still gets a sizable contract. Jung-Hoo Lee, Korean superstar, signs a 6-year, $113 million deal with the San Francisco Giants, a team that has been begging for somebody to take their money. They said, Aaron Judge, take our money. He declined. They said, Carlos Correa, take our money. He accepted, then had bad medicals, and it fell through. They said, Shohei, please take our money. He said no. Finally, they get somebody to say yes, and it is Jung-Hoo Lee.
Yeah, apparently they offered everything the Dodgers did, the exact monetary amount. So, interesting note there. And it's not like the Giants are lacking in cash. They have plenty. And they were able to give some to Jung-Hoo Lee. And like, let's put this into some perspective as he signs a 6-year, $113 million deal. MLB Trade Rumors projected 5 years, $50 million for Jung-Hoo Lee, and he doubled it.
That's a lot. That's a lot for a guy who, if you go back to the show, we profiled him for the Mariners' sake. We said, yeah, I'm not sold on that guy. The Giants apparently feel differently.
That would be a lot for an MPB guy.
Yeah.
Like,
is it weird at all that Jung-Hoo Lee never decided he wanted to play a year or two in Japan rather than Korea? Because it is a step up. And I feel like if he had posted these type of numbers in Japan, maybe then more people would be like, all right, let's take this guy a little more seriously.
There might be some rules around that, especially like pre age 25.
Okay.
Like
then that would make sense.
Yeah, like that would make sense. And again, if you want to hear a full breakdown of Jung-Hoo Lee, we did highlight him back in episode 67. We did our full profile of him, which we're not going to do right here. But again, high contact, decent power. KBO, again, is a little bit above AA in terms of competition there at the KBO, which is why this is kind of staggering of giving a guy $113 million guaranteed. There is an opt-out after 4 years for Lee, by the way. But the competition in the KBO is significantly lower than Major League Baseball. And he crushed KBO competition, don't get us wrong, but it's like giving a very, 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 very good AA player $113 million guaranteed. And some people might shy away from this. The Mariners would have never done this contract. They would have never shelled out this kind of money for a KBO guy.
This is not a perfect example, right? Because Lee plays a much more valuable position than the guy I'm about to name, and he's sustained success in his own league more than the guy I'm about to name. But just for the sake of talking about somewhat of a comparison, could you imagine the Mariners coming out tomorrow and saying, we're giving Tyler Locklear a 6-year, $113 million contract, like pre-arb extension?
I would ask them, like, you guys have claimed to have no money, and then you just lit $113 million on fire.
I don't know if I'd quite say on fire. Like, maybe Locklear ends up being good, but that would be a ridiculous contract to pay a guy that's never.
Little bit of PTSD from signing Arkansas first baseman to 6-year contracts. Sorry.
Who could you ever be talking about?
Yeah,
who knows?
Yeah. Apparently that contract didn't really mean that much, Lyle, according to
No, according to everybody that told us no, like, you guys don't know what you're talking about. You don't know ball. Anyway, Jung-Hoo Lee, at the very least, he's probably not going to strike out a lot. His strikeout rate may go up a little because he's going to go from the KBO to the big leagues where the pitching's better. He should be a high contact guy. Like he makes a ton of contact, like we've talked about. But the other thing here is, how long is it going to take him to get acclimated? Is it going to take him a year, 2 years to really get his feet under him in the big leagues? Because if that's the case, you're paying that guy a lot of money to essentially learn on the fly. Like, I am not confident, personally, that he is just going to snap his fingers and figure it out right away. I think he may have some growing pains.
Took Ha-Sung Kim a year.
Yeah.
Plus. I mean, he's pretty good now, but he's not really Ha-Sung Kim. I mean, still is not an elite offensive player. He's a good all-around player, which I think is what the Giants hope that Jung-Hoo Lee will be, because he's a center fielder and he plays a position of immense value. And, you know, they don't have a center fielder. So, like, at some point, you kind of got to overpay and hope the best comes out of him, that he can hit on top of playing good center field defense, because the Giants had 11 different center fielders last year. And they're like, you know what? Maybe it's worth taking a risk to overpay a guy and hope he works out as the guy.
I will remind people, Jung-Hoo fractured his ankle back in July, which is not the easiest injury in the world to come back from. So we'll see what his center field defense looks like once he hits the majors. He should be okay. I'm guessing the Giants felt more than comfortable about his medicals if they gave him the money that they did. But even still, it's just something to keep note of. It is a serious injury, and we'll see how he bounces back to it.
And the Giants do have, again, the cash reserves to take a hit if things don't work out, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they have quite a bit of money they could spend. I think they're still $45 million away from the bottom tier of tax cap. Like, A, they could add on top of them, but B, they're, they just don't struggle with cash and having dead money like that. So again, it wouldn't really be the end of the world. And overall AAV, it's under 20 million a year. That's not the end of the world. So they feel like Jung-Hoo is worth the risk. I'm fascinated to see if he'll work out. I think at the very least, he'll be a league average hitter and play some solid defense in center field, which, depending on the defense, could be worth $18 million a year, which is totally fine for them.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, let's go to our final subject on the MLB Wraparound. This one coming in at the buzzer this evening. The Los Angeles Dodgers and Tampa Bay Rays are in agreement on a trade to send right-handed pitcher Tyler Glasnow and outfielder Manuel Margot to the Dodgers for right-hander Ryan Pepio and outfielder Johnny DeLuca. Before we actually dive into the meat of this trade, I'd just like to acknowledge that there is one player from each of our two summer league teams when we were calling games in the Cape League involved in this trade. Very, very interesting and very, very small world of this trade to be, but I thought that was pretty cool. Johnny DeLuca played on the team I called games for, and Ryan Pepio, who you've talked to quite a few times, was on the team that you called games for. So that's kind of funny.
Yeah, and it's both the guys going back to the Rays that relate to us, which, yeah, I mean, Pepio and I still keep in touch to some extent. Again, I saw him when he was here in September with the Dodgers and caught up with him a little bit, which was cool. And now hopefully he gets his chance with the Rays too, because the problem there with the Dodgers was even though Ryan was throwing really well, the Dodgers just have so many arms that it's hard to crack that rotation. Now with the Rays, you would think he's going to slot into the rotation and get a real chance to actually throw a real workload of innings, which good for him. But on the Dodgers side, they get a very, very good arm who they think they're going to extend in Tyler Glasnow.
I'm going to give a shout out to Johnny DeLuca too.
Yeah.
I remember when I watched him in summer ball. I'm going to be honest, I wasn't a believer, and man, he's turned out to be like a StatCast darling. Up here at the big league level.
Oh, and he's crushed every level of the minor leagues. Like look at what DeLuca's done every year in the minors over the last 3 seasons. 2021, 867 OPS. 2022, 888 OPS. 2023, 956 OPS. Some dude out of Oregon who was sharing some time out in the Whitey Red Sox outfield. Yeah, that was the team you called games for, I should say. Yeah, he's crushed it through the minors.
Yeah, and shout out to him. And now, again, he's going to get an opportunity with some outfield time being freed up in Tampa. He's going to go there, and I feel like he'll succeed, and I feel like Ryan Pepio will succeed. So let's talk about the Dodgers side of this trade, because I think that's where everyone's circling to. The rumors earlier this week is that it was going to be Glasnow and Randy Arozarena headed to L.A., but it's not going to be the case. It's going to be Margot and Tyler Glasnow. The meat of this is Tyler Glasnow, and if he can stay healthy, which has been a problem in his career. Tyler Glasnow cannot stay on the mound. He has a lot of trouble staying on the mound. The good thing is, if the Dodgers can keep him on the mound, he is one of the better pitchers in baseball when he can. I mean, he's only throws 2 pitches, but when he is on with his fastball, which goes up to 98, 99, 100 miles an hour, and his curveball, which is an ultimate hammer, he's a stud. And the Dodgers develop pitching almost as good as the Rays do. And they could tweak something here, tweak something there, perhaps keep him healthy, and potentially, if they can get him up to like 180 innings, have a true all-star caliber stud that they traded for.
His curveball was as good in 2023 as it's ever been. He threw it more than ever in 23, and guys started hitting 0.95 against it. I mean, his curveball's been good in the past, but 23, something clicked even a step further than it was already going. So Tyler Glasnow going to the Dodgers feels like a recipe for success. I feel like he's going to be really good when he's there. And that Dodgers rotation now, it is Walker Buehler, Tyler Glasnow, Bobby Miller, and there's still room for those guys to add. They'll probably get Clayton Kershaw back and sign him for when he returns midseason. I can't imagine he goes anywhere else. But there are still opportunities for that team to add 1 to 2 more arms, and we know they're in on Yamamoto.
Yeah, and again, this is what people feared, as we mentioned in the Shohei thing, when Shohei gave them this kind of flexibility, that they were going to be able to go acquire these guys. And the fact that they had to give up Pepio and DeLuca, I mean, we pretty much think they're going to give Tyler Glasnow an extension here. They're not going to give up those assets for only 1 year of Tyler Glasnow, who, by the way, is going to be a free agent after this 2024 season. So, and they're going to have to pay a steep price on him. I mean, he's a starter who's going to cost upwards of $25 million a year to keep in that rotation. And I mean, even healthy or not, that's what the bill is going to be for him. So they could afford it. But you know, that's where the numbers for Shohei kind of works out.
For sure. Will the Dodgers add more? It's certainly possible. Oh,
Good.
Also, can we clear something up? The reason Randy Arozarena was rumored to be in this trade is because, like, I don't think there was ever actually that much of a connection to Randy in the trade. There might have been a report here and there saying, oh, like the Dodgers are asking about him. But the reason that started to get rumored is because he posted a picture hours after Shohei signed of a picture of the two of them standing together at the World Baseball Classic, which maybe was just Randy's way of congratulating Shohei. But everybody started to think, oh, is Randy about to be a Dodger? Well, it appears that's not to be the case. And I'll tell you what, if Johnny DeLuca is going to start playing the outfield, he's going to have to take time from somebody. Maybe they just need to move on from Randy and send him to, I don't know, just off the top of my head, a city on the complete opposite side of the country from Tampa.
I think Randy was just trolling with that. I mean, he was having some fun with that, I'll say. Here's my worry, though, now. So the Rays dump salary with Glasnow, essentially. This is a salary dump for the Rays as well. They're moving off of, I don't know the exact number for Glasnow, but it's a healthy amount because he's in his final year of arbitration. And they get back 2 guys on rookie contracts. So how much more do they need to offload, would they feel like? Like, they wouldn't be trading Randy they wouldn't trade Randy to dump salary now because they've dumped the most significant piece they've needed to.
Okay, 2 things off that. One, Glasnow is expected to make about $25 million this year because he signed that contract. It was a 2-year, $30.5 million ARB extension, and most of that money is backloaded. So he's about to get like $25 million this year. Number 2, let me pull this up really fast because there's a tweet from Daniel Kramer today about what exactly you're referencing right now. He said, the belief has long been that before the Rays would make other trades this offseason, such as dealing some of their bats, many of which would be strong fits for the Mariners, sorting out Glasnow's situation must come first. They've done that. That makes it sound like, oh, they're open to other moves. But now that Tyler Glasnow's settled, we can start talking to other teams. I don't know if this totally cuts off the deal with them in terms of trading Arozarena or Isaac Paredes. In fact, now they need more pitching. So maybe. That
in fact encourages it. It sounds like.
Yeah, I would agree. I 100% agree.
I'm down.
So I think the Mariners still have a shot. Go get Randy. TJ's tapping the watch, doing the Randy Arozarena.
Watch us on YouTube. You can see what I'm doing.
Randy Arozarena is such a fun personality. Even we talked about this when we talked about him the other week. But even aside from how good he is on the baseball field, he'd be so fun to have on the team.
I'm down. You don't have to tell me.
Yeah, I am too. Okay, let's get to Speak Your Mind here. I think we've got a collaborated Speak Your Mind this week. We talked about doing this a little bit because for those who don't know, if we're going to talk about TJ and I ourselves and not us doing this podcast, but us just trying to find our way in sports media, we're trying to navigate it just like a lot of people our age are. So we thought we'd spend a little bit of time here and talk about it and talk about what each of us are trying to accomplish moving forward, including continuing this podcast, of course. But like, where do you want to start with this? We could really start anywhere.
Well, we could just give a little bit of background first. So you and I it's already been almost over 3 years now since we left college. So that 3 years since we've been at ASU. So you spent one.
Yeah.
What's up?
3.5. Yeah.
3.5. Yep. Out of school, you and I both thought minor league baseball was it. Pandemic changed that significantly. You still ended up going to minor league baseball for 1 year in 2022. I have been here in Corvallis working in radio for a little bit over 2 years now, two and like a third ish. So that's where we're at right now. And we are in a spot of sort of figuring things out. Like, all transparency, like, I've been at this first job, which it is very much a first job. I've discussed with my boss about, this. He knows how the business works and first jobs and all that, and understand after about, 2 years, a lot of people who are looking to move up are all ears to other opportunities and seeing how they can grow themselves. And, you're looking for your next opportunity as well, Lyle. So it's like we've been in sort of the same state at the same time for about the last year. While we've been doing this podcast, we've been doing plenty of other things like working and networking, but more importantly, trying to find our next jobs. Like that's essentially where we have both been at for the last year. And I think you and I have learned a lot of valuable things. I mean, I think first off, like talking, I've never realized the value of talking to people more than I have in the last year, of people I had no idea that were going to be a valuable voice in my life, that I've met over the last year, just on the phone, DMing them on Twitter, LinkedIn, finding their email, etc., and just getting to talk to them over the phone and them giving me advice and helping me realize, what's realistic and what's not over the course of this year has been extremely helpful as well. And I guess that's where I'll start. I have so many things I can talk about with this, but I think I'll just start with that I really have picked up some very valuable connections in this business, and to a point where I feel like I have some very comfortable future landing options here down the road eventually, at places that I would feel confident in because of the hiring people I've talked to and the talent as well that makes it feel that way.
So we thought it would be a fun thing to do this. The two of us just kind of dive into where us ourselves are trying to get, especially nowadays, where we're really trying to kind of kick it into high gear with finding our next thing. In fact, the only thing I have written down in our notes for Speak Your Mind is job searching in sports media is ridiculously hard. That is my one note, because I knew we'd probably go a bunch of different directions with this. But yeah, like, I think everything you said is basically along the lines of what we've talked about over the last year. Then on my end, after getting back from minor league baseball, I realized, between the day-to-day, the pay, the lifestyle, I was like, I don't think I can do this for 20 plus years. I just can't. Not for like the swing on a star wish to maybe get to the big leagues one day. Even if you work as hard as you possibly can at it, like, you do need some luck along the way. And back to your point about the networking and the connections, the conversations, like I'll piggyback off that, and maybe we can start here. Is they always talk about in finding jobs in general, the who you know part of it means a lot and can help a lot. I don't know if I've ever seen a field where it means more than in sports media. Like just from knowing other people that are in different fields, I've heard of plenty of people that are in business or accounting or marketing, whatever, where you can apply to jobs on LinkedIn, apply to jobs on Indeed. You'll hear back from people sometimes, and you'll get interviews off that. If you're going to apply to a job on LinkedIn or Indeed or something like that, trying to get something in sports media, what I basically learned is you're almost wasting your time in a sense, because there are so many people that apply to the jobs. Your resume is going to get buried. They're never going to see it. It's almost like they just put it up there because they have to put it up there. And rather than it's actually, we're looking for applicants based off the people that apply. It's usually based off of having prior connections, which is what I've learned about sports media, is like networking with people. It's about as important in this field as I've kind of seen it, as I have seen it anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. And again, it's not, you shouldn't, the thing I've also learned is that when I started, it's like, all right, I'm going to meet someone who's going to hire me, because that's how I got this job in the first place. Like, I networked with my boss doing the exact same thing I'm doing now. I mean, we sat there and talked on the phone for an hour, right? When I first reached out to him and talked to him, like, we had an hour-long conversation. It was like, oh yeah. And then eventually I got hired a few months later after the position opened up. So it's like, oh, great. Like, I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to meet my future boss on the phone. Well, it's not quite that simple. And here I am a year into doing that. and realizing that it is way, way, way more than just doing that. You also have to learn. And I think the most important thing you have to learn is like what exactly you want to do. You don't have to like exactly do one thing. I think that's kind of an old way of thinking about things, to only do one thing. Because to be honest, like most of these companies nowadays are really shrinking down. They're really skimming down their companies into people who can do more than one thing, because they realize paying a lot of people to do a lot of things is too expensive, and paying a few people to do a lot of things is more the way. It doesn't matter if you're in the podcasting business. It doesn't matter if you're in the sports media business. It doesn't matter if you're in radio. It doesn't matter if you're at a Major League Baseball team. Like, they all do it. All major businesses will do it that way. So it's like, okay, you got to like figure out exactly what you want to do. And I would say, at least for, how you and I are at right now, and like it's two different paths at this moment of what we feel like is our most realistic step next. You say you want to go work at like a sports media company, like list off like a John Boy Media, for example, or something smaller, something along those lines, something that does something like that. Meanwhile, for me, I've been looking at radio jobs around the country and trying to find it, because that's what's on my resume, and that's what would stick out the most to a hiring manager. Hey, I've already worked at a radio station for 2.5 years. I know everything that I'm doing. And I think that's been very helpful in my search to have a better understanding. And more importantly, I don't know how it's been for you, but it's pretty up and down mentally for looking at this stuff. Like, it sucks. It really does suck to think that you're the amount of times I've sat here and thought, I'm 25, I'm living in Corvallis, Oregon. I'm looking at all my friends in bigger places doing something that looks way more fun than what I'm doing right now on a Friday night, sitting here, I don't know, recording the podcast, editing something, watching TV. It's like, man, that seems fun. It's like, and you get the question of like, why am I here? Like, you do ask that question, why I'm here. But then when you have more conversations with people and you come to a better understanding of what you're doing and what you're actually passionate about, it definitely helps, I'll say. And again, it helps having a more clear picture of what you see your future looking like to move forward and go on out. I mean, I'm really all over the place with this, but I would say, yeah.
Well, you were talking about like editing the podcast and doing social clips, like you don't like doing it. Like I know that's not true.
No, it's not. But think of it like it's a Friday night.
Oh, you're talking about a Friday night specifically. Okay.
Right, yes, I would say Friday and Saturday nights are the worst. They are. Maybe it's an adult thing. Some people don't do as much once they're older on a Friday and Saturday night. We're so used to it in your 20s when you're in college. I mean, every Friday and Saturday night. I mean, college it was more than that, but we'll simple it down to Friday and Saturday night. You're always going to do something. Always. No matter what. But then you grow up and you move to some small place to go chase a dream, and you're sitting here working your ass off, and all of a sudden you look up and you stick your head above water. Everyone else is doing exactly what you thought you'd be doing, and you're sitting here working. And sometimes it's a tough reality for some people.
Well, they do say sports media chews people up and spits people out. Like, we have friends who got their sports journalism degrees with us and either didn't even bother to get into the field or just stopped because it was too much on them, because the hours are crazy. Obviously, the pay in the early stages is really bad, especially in minor league baseball, which is part of the reason I didn't end up doing it again. Not that I'm all about money or anything like that. I'm not. But like to be transparent, you make like $1,500 a month working 70-hour weeks in minor league baseball. And that's not sustainable for any person to live off of. So there's also no time to find another job on the side when you're doing that either. So yeah, that's just not really sustainable. Now, when you move up in minor league baseball, sometimes you can start to make a little bit more. You're not getting rich, but you make a little bit more.
Get health insurance.
What's that?
You get health insurance.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, I think the thing for you about not having as much to do on the weekends is partly the fact you are in Corvallis, Oregon, in a college town where not a lot of people in their 20s after they graduate are living there. Like, you talk about how you're the youngest person at your station by 10 to 15 years. So yeah, I think that's more about the town you're in. Like, if you find your next job and it's in a bigger city, I bet you'd meet people your age where you're going to find more stuff
Correct.
to do.
And that's what I think, and that helps the motivation. I'll say the biggest thing I've tried to hammer home, and I think you've probably realized this too, is not to rush. Like
It's
plain and
hard
simple.
not to, though.
Yeah, it is really hard not to, because you see it as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is the worst thing about one of the worst things about social media. You can see some people who do get it at this age, and they do make lots of money, and they are very successful in the field you want to be at this age. The problem is it's not that many people, and it's really a tough reality to realize for a lot of us who aren't that lucky.
It's the whole grass is greener philosophy. Like that is a very true thing, especially when you talk about, like, you see your friends in other places doing things that seem really fun. Like, I'm sure not, like, there's things about their lives that are not perfect either, but again, it's always the grass is greener philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're right that, like, especially the two of us, but a ton of people out there who are in sports media, like, feel like they can move up and feel like they are capable of moving up. But again, along with being good at what you're doing, you need some luck and you need some good timing. So we're both, like, hoping that can swing our way here in the near future, which is why we do all this networking. And also, like, that's why we put in so much effort to doing everything we're doing, not just with the podcast, but in fact, like, here's an example. You and I have both started to do our own personal content creation stuff. Like, I guess this is a little shameless plug for the both of us, but this is only a couple weeks old for each of us, but we've each started to do some, not just day in the life stuff, but just posting personal content on our own TikTok, Instagram pages to try to build some of a personal brand. Like, I'll use me, for example, like, in terms, and this kind of ties into where I'm at, because you're talking about being in Corvallis. Like, I'm still in Seattle for at least the next few weeks. What I've talked about on my social media pages, and I've told some of our friends about and family about, is that for the next 2 to 3 months, I'm going to spend some time in New York City. Now, I'm doing that because a lot of the places I'd love to work are out there. I've connected with a lot of people that are out there. I'm hoping the fact that getting in front of them and meeting them in person and spending some time in person might be able to help me. It's no guarantee that it works. In fact, I'd say it's far from a guarantee that it works. And truthfully, it's a little bit nerve-wracking to be kind of going out on a whim to the other side of the country and give this a shot for a few months. But to the point of we're both trying to do everything that's necessary to find our next job, I started to feel like that might be the next step to find my next job, because again, like, I just don't know how much sitting at home does. Now, let me say two things. One, it's not like we're going to stop the podcast. In fact, we've got some big plans for the second year of it. But I'd also like to find a full-time job too. And with that, I'm trying to document it all. I'm documenting that I'm getting ready to move. I'm going to document what I'm doing most of the days I'm in New York City, like documenting, things I learned, and I just talk some sports on there too. But yeah, I'm going a bunch of different ways with this too. But we have each started to do some content, personal content, as another way of how can we put ourselves out there and show people that we have some other skills, And,
like, what's the worst that happens? We don't get famous.
Right.
Like, that's it.
And somebody might see it, even if you're only getting, a few hundred, couple thousand views, let's say, on those reels or TikToks. You just don't know who might see it and say, oh, well, I can relate to this person, or maybe they're looking for somebody. You just don't know.
There's some benefits to it. Let's list off some things. First of all, like, it keeps you consistent. We work on this podcast every single day. However, and we are posting on this podcast every single day, but we've gotten in a pretty good routine of what we're doing. So it's not really as much of a cram or tell me if I'm wrong, Lyle, like an overly creative thought process to put things together on a day-to-day basis. Yes?
With the normal stuff we usually post, no. I think we are creative with the stuff we put out there, not just with the show clips, but some of the social media ideas that we have. Like, I think we're creative, but you're right that we've done it for a little over a year now, that we are used to it. So that part I agree with you on.
We're used to it. And again, we also have 2 hours and 45 minutes worth of podcast content that we post throughout the week, right? That is already done and recorded. And I'll say that's in terms of thinking creatively, like, that's where most of it comes from. We've already talked about it. Like, yes. Okay. Yeah. So in terms of things you're doing, like, it now that the both of us are doing, we now have to take some more time out of each of our day to find something interesting that makes us interesting, that makes us stand out, that makes us different. Like, the thing about the podcast, which is done phenomenally, and we cannot thank you guys for listening enough. We really cannot. I cannot tell you how appreciative we are of seeing our numbers here after a little over a year of doing this. But to our own brands. Like, it forces us to now, within each day, find a new way to storytell. And I cannot say how beneficial that is to us doing this, to find new ways to like storytell and be interesting, because we want to be interesting here. We want to keep your interest in this podcast. So what's the best way to do that? Well, we talk about baseball a lot. But what if we're talking about things that aren't baseball, specifically baseball related? We still want to be interesting. Well, a great way to practice that is to do our own content. Like, let me draw the line between our two things. So you're still doing mostly sports stuff on your channel, what you're talking about. Did a few day in the lives. You've talked about a few things here so far for what you've done. I've been doing like day in the lives of my life. And I want to bring this back to what I said about, you know, me struggling on like a Friday or a Saturday night, like worrying like, hey, is this worth it? Like, I don't know if I'm enjoying this, yada, yada. Like, I'm seeing everyone else having so much more fun. This thing forces me to find fun things in my day every single day. And at the end of every single day, I'm going to go back into my day and find what that fun thing is and bring it back out every single day. And you know what? I've already felt the benefits of it, because you know what? Since I've started it, football season has been over. Football is my busy season here for Oregon State. Once football season ends, my busy season is over. It calms down quite a bit, and I need things to do. And I've got to say, like, the benefit that this has brought to be able to do this, even with only 300 viewers of TikTok or 400 viewers in Instagram video, the benefits have been immense. I mean, I can only imagine, like, the jump I've taken in 2 weeks of editing and creativeness of shooting. I think it's just so beneficial and really just adds so many more tools to what's possible for myself in the future for someone who's chasing a radio job. But hey, look at this social media profile I've built. Look at this. Look how valuable this is. Look at my storytelling. Look at my video editing. Look at all this stuff I can do. Look at all this stuff that makes me valuable. I mean, that's the whole point in all this. Like, to my point at the beginning, making a way to make yourself valuable. I think like this is it for both of us. It is putting as many tentacles out as possible, hands in as many jars as possible, to try and make ourselves valuable. And eventually one of those jars will lead us to being successful, I hope.
Yeah. I think you said that all well. And especially the part about us trying to broaden our skills a little bit. I mean, like example, we both did a bunch of broadcasting in college. I did it in the minors. Now I'm trying to focus a bunch on all this podcast content creation stuff. Again, like how TJ mentioned, these are the type of jobs I'm looking for. And the reason I'm going to New York City for a few months is because it's these type of sports media companies that do a lot of podcasting, that do a bunch of content creation, that do stuff on social media. Like, that stuff really applies to me now. And it also seems to be the way most of media is trending nowadays. That's what's popular. So between really enjoying it and also wanting to stay with the times a little bit, I've started to focus my direction that way. But just how TJ's saying too, how he has radio experience, how he has play-by-play experience. Now we both obviously do a bunch of stuff within this podcast that enhances our social media podcasting skills, but then he's doing his own personal stuff too. And what I'd say I'm doing more with my brand is, I'm talking about sports. I'm trying to broaden it out than doing more than just the Mariners, whether it's in baseball. I did some college football stuff here today. But above everything else, I'm trying to talk to people about what it's like to be in sports media. And I think once I get to New York, it'll be a little bit more transparent. I mean, sorry, I shouldn't say transparent. It's transparent now, but it'll be more interesting because I'll really be in the like day-to-day of actively trying to find my next job. And obviously I'm networking with people now, but it's a little different just being at home most days rather than like being in my destination that I'm set to go to. That's what I've been talking about with people, is like the lead up to going to New York City and all that. I think that'll be a little bit more of an intrigue to people, which I hope people find it interesting. But yeah, like I've enjoyed doing it too. I think it's very helpful. I think it just gives me something extra to do, and above everything else, like hopefully people find it interesting, I guess.
And the best thing about New York is I just don't think you know who you'll run into. You've already picked out people who you're going to talk to and that you've already networked with, but in the city that never sleeps, you never know.
Yeah, it's true. You know what's funny? I don't know if anybody's going to get this reference, and TJ had no idea who this person is, but when we were in New York a couple months back for our trip, we were at a bar in New York City, and we ran into Pilot Pete of all people while we were there, who was The Bachelor. Like, now maybe nobody listening to this podcast is people who are diehard sports fans get that reference, but I ran into him. The guy happens to be a big Seahawks fan, so I walked up to him and said, "Go Hawks," and it led to us talking for 90 seconds or so about the Seahawks. And that's just to TJ's point about you never know who you'll meet. Never in a million years that I think I'd see that guy. So yeah, you never know. Maybe I'll meet some more people that, one, are interesting, but two, are unique to our own field. But yeah, I think this is just us trying to show that we're still going through it. We're still trying to find our next steps. So hopefully we're being transparent about that here in this segment. And we're certainly trying to work as hard as we can towards it. And hopefully we kind of find it.
And to anyone who might be interested, we've had people DM us asking about it. This is us being transparent about it, as Lyle just said. Let's be clear. It's not easy. It looks like a lot of fun when you've made it, and it is. But it's not easy. You got to buckle up, and you really got to look at yourself and think if you really want to do this, because a lot of people really want to do this. The problem is most people with the money that fund these things know that you really want to do it, and that usually leads to there being less opportunity than you would think.
Right.
And I will say the best way, if you want to do this, the best way, just start on your own.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait for anybody. Now more than ever. When we were in school, this wasn't the case, but now it is 3.5 years later. If you want to make content, hell, if you want to call games, there's an Instagram account of people calling games with hundreds of thousands of subscribers, calling games on television, like on a TV. If you want to do any of that stuff, just start a channel, start a TikTok account, start an Instagram account. Just do it. Just do it. You're going to be your own best friend teaching yourself. You're going to be your own best networker and resume enhancer by just doing it yourself. Because Lyle and I thought when we started this, we need an outlet to talk about something. Why don't we? We talk about this every single freaking day. Why don't we just start? Right? And let me bring this back to my radio background again. So at my station, we have one live sports show. I'm not an everyday host of that show. So I don't get on-air reps every single day. I record stuff every single day, but I don't get live reps every single day. But this thing right here allows me to do that. Lyle and I are we want to do a sports show. Okay, let's just start it. And look at us. You put a year into it. What was the stat you brought up, Lyle? Most podcasts don't make it past the third episode. 90% don't make it past the third episode. Well, look at us here. Episode 83. Yeah. And we wanted to do this sports show, and we've made it happen.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about starting a Mariners podcast for a while, but it was kind of like how we've talked about. We always said if we were going to start it, we wanted to make sure we had the time, make sure we had the right vision for it, and make sure we were going to put a lot of effort into it. Because I didn't want to be one of those podcasts that thought of a name, thought of a logo, made the Twitter account, put all this effort into the long form content. And then after 3 or 4 episodes, when you see it's hard to get listeners, you're like, well, are we going to record an episode this week? It's maybe. Are we going to record one next week? Yeah, if I have time. No, we didn't want to do that. We wanted to put a lot of effort into it. We wanted to do a bunch of stuff on social media, not just posting show clips, but all the stuff you guys have seen us do out at the field this year, between talking to the fans and doing the player content, and even some of the food reviews early in the year when we were doing that. We wanted to find interesting things to do. We wanted to be different. We didn't just want to sit down and record a podcast every week. We wanted to talk about the Mariners, and we wanted to get nerdy with the analytics stuff, but we also wanted to make sure our personalities were showing, and we wanted to do some stuff that other people weren't really doing, which is some of this new school social content. And we have thoroughly enjoyed it a bunch. And that's such a huge reason I think now I'm so zoned in on this idea of finding a job at a sports media company, doing podcasting and content creation, is from everything we've done with this. I realized even more than doing the play-by-play stuff, which I always thought was going to be my path, that this stuff's really fun. I'd love to do this for a career and a living one day. And there's an outlet for it now. And there's also an outlet to be a fan and be in sports media, which I love. And when you're in journalism school, like we were, they tell you, yeah, you can't really do that. Well, that's not true anymore. You can absolutely do that. So I really love everything we've been able to do with this podcast, because not only has it taught us a bunch, but it's opened my eyes even more to, oh, you should take this route.
And I think the most important thing off of all of that you just said is that if we put enough work into this and we're this successful with it, I mean, this could be our job. If we get to that point, it very well could be. If you're able to find a way to generate the revenue, you can do that. And I think that like that's something Lau and I realized in a motivating factor a year in, and seeing the growth and seeing some of the numbers that we brought in of what is possible if we keep doing this. And I'll say another beneficiary of us being over a year into this podcast is we understand for our own personal brands now what it takes. Again, I think I'm 3 weeks into doing my day in the lives. I have cracked 400 views on a TikTok one time. They've stayed pretty stagnant. And you know what? I've tried doing my own TikToks before. You know what I did after a month? I quit because this is the results I've gotten. But you know what? Now that we've done it for an entire year and we know what growing a channel is like, I understand it's not going to happen overnight. And for all of you that would want to do this and want to do your own thing, it's not. Unless you get lucky and go viral, it's not going to grow overnight. You just got to put a lot of work into it and watch it grow.
I remember when we first started our social accounts, and I'd say to you, I see all these people blow up on TikTok all the time. Like, why isn't that happening to us? This was like a few weeks in. You're like, you'd been on TikTok more than I had at this point. And you're like, you know, that's not the norm. That's the outlier. And I was like, well, maybe you've got a point there. And that's what we learned. We were getting 300 to 400 views on a lot of our early stuff, and it stayed like that for a while. And it was, you know, it was a consistent, steady buildup. And that's totally normal. That's totally fine. But if you keep putting effort into it, that's what happens. And we should clarify too about having this become a potential job of ours one day. Like, that's our dream, right? And we'll work toward that. We're by no means sitting here saying, oh, like in a few months that's going to happen. No, we're not saying that at all. We're just saying no. We're just saying that one day we'd love to make that happen. I think we now aspire to make that happen. And we're, you know, and with that, like we said at the start of this, we've got no intention or idea by any stretch to stop this anytime soon. In fact, we've got some pretty unique and I don't want to say big, but I guess kind of big ideas we've got for year 2. We might save that for our last episode of the year. We figured maybe on our final episode of 2023, we'd do a recap of like, oh, like what's the first basically full year of the podcast all culminated together look like, but just more tying it back now to us trying to find our next jobs and stuff. Like, this has definitely helped us. I think it's definitely given us like a bunch of skills that maybe we didn't have as much of beforehand. And, you know, hopefully it can lead somewhere. Hopefully it leads somewhere with you with looking at these radio jobs. Hopefully in New York, I meet the right people and it turns into something. So yeah.
Yeah. And who knows where all this stuff leads down the road. Like, when we talk about like new school sports media, like you're looking at in radio, as if there are these astronomically different things. They're not.
No.
One just has a government agency regulating it. That's literally it. The FCC. That's it. It's the only difference.
Yeah, that's right. That's 100% right. They're not that different, but a way that we stay the same is, again, we're looking to move our path along and find our next thing. So as we start to kind of wrap this up, I mean, hopefully for people that found this somewhat interesting, that you enjoyed it. If you didn't like listening to us talk, I guess we don't have to do it ever again. If you all were like, well, this was boring, I don't really care, just talk about the Mariners, that's fine. But we just figured for those of you that might be interested to hear a little bit more about us and transparently where we're at and where we're both trying to get to, like, we figured this would be a decent time to kind of sit and talk about it. And we thought this would be a good time for it because, especially over the last couple months, you and I off air have had a lot of conversations about this, about each of us trying to move along. So we're like, well, we're talking about it here. Maybe the people that listen to us would be interested to hear where we're at too. So hopefully at least you found it 1% interesting.
Yeah, really hope so. And again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to like leave us a comment, shoot us a DM on Instagram, whatever. Like, we'll see it.
Yeah. We always love talking about the funny stuff on Speak Your Mind, but if we get some feedback on this saying, hey, like, I like hearing more about you guys and your own lives, you should do it more often. If you like hearing us talk about it, maybe every month-ish or so, we can kind of give some updates. So yeah, leave us a comment and let us know. But with that, I think that'll just about wrap up this edition of the Marine Layer podcast. You guys know the drill. If you want to listen to the full form podcast, you can do so wherever you find your audio side of the podcast. If you do that, make sure to download, leave us a 5-star review, follow the show. The reviews and downloads, they help us out a bunch. Go like, comment, subscribe on YouTube, where we do our full video podcast, and follow us on social media on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube Shorts at Marine Layer Pod. That's TJ. I'm Lyle. As always, we thank you guys for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.